Have you ever heard of the wisest king of all time? Yes, I'm talking about Solomon. He was famous for his intelligence, wealth, and for having built the incredible temple in Jerusalem. But, did you know that not even he escaped making mistakes? Well, today we are going to delve into this story full of twists and turns, from the moment Solomon became king until his last days. Oh, before we start, leave a like and subscribe to the channel, because this content is unmissable. Solomon was the son of King David and Bathsheba, and his arrival on the throne was not easy. After David died, one of his sons, Adonijah, tried to take power. Just imagine the confusion. But, thanks to the intervention of the prophet Nathan and Bathsheba herself, Solomon ended up being crowned as the legitimate king of Israel. And that was just the first big battle of his journey. Want to know how this story continues? So stay with me until the end, because there are lots of surprising things ahead. Have you ever imagined what choosing a king must have been like back then? Well, the dispute for the throne of Israel was not simple at all. But God already had a plan and chose Solomon to be the next king. The person who ensured that this happened was Bathsheba, his mother, along with the prophet Nathan. They reminded King David that God had already revealed that Solomon should rule and build a great temple in Jerusalem. And this promise appears in the Bible, in the book of 1 Chronicles 22. God said to David something more or less like this: "David, you have fought many battles and shed much blood. Therefore, you will not be the one to build my temple. But do not worry. Your son, Solomon, will be a king of peace, and I will give rest to Israel during his reign." In fact, the name Solomon itself means peace. And that was exactly what he brought when he began to govern, stability and tranquility for the people of Israel. So, are you curious to know more about the history of this special king? So stay with me, because there are still a lot of interesting things to discover. If there's one thing that made Solomon stand out among the kings of his time, it was his incredible wisdom. But do you know where this wisdom came from? From a very special request that he made to God at the beginning of his reign. The Bible says, back in 1 Kings 3 verses 3 to 14, that Solomon went to Gibeon to offer sacrifices to God. And it was that night that something surprising happened. God appeared to him in a dream and said, "Solomon, ask for whatever you want, and I will give it to you." Wow! Just imagine, God giving you the chance to ask for anything. Solomon could have chosen riches, fame, power, but no. He recognized that governing the people of Israel was a great responsibility and asked for something very special: wisdom to govern with justice. He knew that he would not be able to make good decisions alone and wanted God to help him be a fair and wise king. And do you know what happened? God was so happy with Solomon's request that he not only gave him wisdom, but also riches, honor, and a reign of peace. And this choice by Solomon teaches us something very important. When we seek first what really matters, God blesses us in ways we can't even imagine. Solomon didn't just want to be a rich or powerful king. What he wanted most was to be a fair and wise leader, someone who governed with integrity and followed God's ways. And do you know what happened? God was so pleased with this request that he not only gave him wisdom, but also promised riches and honor like no one had ever had in Israel. And Solomon's wisdom became famous very quickly. One of the most incredible episodes that shows this is the story of two women who competed for motherhood of a baby. It's there in the Bible, in 1 Kings 3 verses 16 to 28. It happened like this: two women lived together and had babies at the same time. But, tragically, one of the babies died. That's when the confusion began. The two women started saying that the live baby was theirs. Since no one knew who was telling the truth, they went to King Solomon to ask for justice. Now think with me, how do I find out who the real mother was? There were no DNA tests back then. But Solomon had a brilliant idea. He looked at both of them and said, "Since they both say the baby is yours, let's do the following: cut the child in half and give half to each of them." Sounds crazy, right? But calm down. The king didn't really want to do this. He knew that the real mother loved her son more than anything and would never let anything bad happen to him. And that's exactly what happened. One of the women screamed in despair, "No. Leave the baby with her, but please don't hurt him." At the same time, Solomon realized that this was the real mother. After all, only a real mother would give up her own child to save his life. So he returned the baby to her and everyone was impressed by his wisdom. This episode teaches us that true wisdom is not just about being smart, but also about understanding people's hearts and acting justly. This story showed everyone that Solomon was not just any king, but an extremely wise leader. But that wasn't the only amazing thing he did. Solomon was also very famous for a gigantic work: the construction of the temple in Jerusalem. This temple was not just a beautiful building, it was the place where the people gathered to worship God, a symbol of the divine presence among them. In fact, this idea came from his father, King David, but God said that Solomon was the one who should build the temple. And he did it in an impressive way. The temple was rich in details, full of gold and precious materials, showing how prosperous the kingdom was at that time. The story of Solomon teaches us that true wisdom comes from God and that a good leader must always act with justice, love, and respect for his people. It was King Solomon who carried out this great project. He built an incredible temple for God, and he didn't do it anyhow. He used the most precious materials there were. Just imagine, special wood brought from Lebanon and lots of pure gold covering various parts of the temple. All of this showed how much Solomon wanted to honor God. The temple was built in a very special place, Mount Moriah. And do you know why? Because it was there that Abraham, long before, showed his faith by almost sacrificing his son Isaac out of obedience to God. This made the place even more sacred. Once completed, Solomon's temple turned the heart of Israel. It was there that the people gathered to worship God and feel closer to him. But Solomon was not just a great builder, he was also very wise and made alliances with other people. One of the most famous moments was when the Queen of Sheba decided to visit him. She heard about his wisdom and decided to test it with difficult questions, and guess what? Solomon answered everything with ease. She was so impressed that she brought him valuable gifts and recognized that God had given him incredible wisdom. This story is in the Bible, in the book of 1 Kings, chapter 10, verses 1 to 13, and in 2 Cr. The Queen of Sheba was super curious about Solomon's wisdom and decided to travel to Jerusalem to test her knowledge. And she didn't go alone. His caravan was gigantic, full of camels carrying rare spices, shining gold, and precious stones. When he got there, he started asking Solomon several difficult questions, but he answered them all without even hesitating. Nothing could catch him by surprise. In addition to this incredible visit, Solomon also made friends with other kingdoms. He married princesses from important places like Egypt and Phoenicia, something kings did back then to keep peace and create strong alliances. In this way, he managed to maintain good relations with several nations. But not everything in Solomon's story was perfect. Even though he was very wise and known for his great achievements, he also made mistakes. Some decisions he made ended up causing problems for him and the people of Israel later on. Solomon's story shows us that, no matter how intelligent and powerful someone is, it is always important to be careful with the choices we make. Chronicles, chapter 9, verses 1 to 12. Incredible, right? Solomon's temple was not just a beautiful building, it showed the faith, wisdom, and special connection between God and the people of Israel. Solomon's story shows us that, no matter how intelligent and powerful someone is, it is always important to be careful with the choices we make. Solomon, even though he was a very wise and famous king, also made some mistakes that changed the history of Israel. Do you know what happened? He fell in love with many princesses from other countries, not just Pharaoh's daughter, but several others as well. The problem is that these princesses worshipped other gods, and God had asked the people of Israel not to marry those who worshipped idols. But Solomon didn't follow this advice and ended up getting involved with several foreign women. Over time, began to allow these princesses to bring their own gods and perform rituals that did not please the God of Israel. And it didn't stop there. Solomon even built temples for these foreign gods, just to please his wives. This was a great mistake, because it turned the hearts of Solomon and the people of Israel away from true worship. This choice ended up bringing many problems to the kingdom. People began to worship various gods and moved away from the true God. This was one of Solomon's biggest mistakes, who despite all his wisdom, was unable to resist the influences around him. This story teaches us that even the wisest people can make mistakes when they don't follow the right advice. In the last years of his life, Solomon was no longer the same wise king as he had been in the beginning. His wrong choices began to bring problems for him and for Israel. Because he allowed his people to worship other gods, it was against God's commandments, and he was very disappointed. Because of this, God raised enemies against Solomon. One of them was Jeroboam, a man who was once trusted by the king, but who ended up rebelling and would later become leader of the northern tribes. The kingdom that was once so strong and united began to divide. After 40 years as king, Solomon died. The Bible does not say exactly how he died, but we know that his time came to an end and he was buried in the city of David, along with his ancestors. His son, Rehoboam, took the throne after him. Solomon's reign had incredible moments, such as the construction of the Great Temple in Jerusalem and a time of peace and wealth for Israel. But there were also mistakes that brought serious consequences. His story teaches us that even the wisest people need to be careful with their choices, because they can change everything. After Solomon died, his son Rehoboam took the throne. But instead of continuing to rule a strong and united kingdom, he ended up facing a big problem. Israel split into two. On one side, in the north, Jeroboam remained as leader of several tribes. On the other, in the south, Rehoboam stayed with Judah and Benjamin. All of this happened because of Solomon's wrong choices, which had consequences for the future of the kingdom. This story teaches us an important lesson. The decisions we make today can affect our future and even those of those around us. Solomon had incredible moments, but he also made mistakes that changed Israel's destiny. So, what did you think of this story? Leave your opinion in the comments. A hug and may God bless you.